Hi, it's time once again for a bit of poetry sandwich. Okay, so it's Helen Claire Gould here, and this is my personal live stream. We'll be starting with a poem and ending with a poem, and in the middle, the filling is some fiction. Okay, so I like to start dark and go lighter through the evening or the session. So here is drive-by shooting. I dreamed of blood, the long red flow slowing and slowing as the heart within stilled. It was a drive-by shooting in a small town in England. I saw their faces on TV, stabbed, shot, strangled or drowned. Another young life lost, another child missing without trace. A drive-by shooting in a small town in England. How is this even acceptable in the 21st century? How can we make excuses? Aren't we civilized enough to know that there can't be another drive-by shooting in a small town in England? My heart jolts and closes up, and a wave of pain flows through me for every child that dies alone in pain or fear or dread. It's a drive-by shooting in a small town in England. Thank you so much. I won't say I hope you enjoyed that, because it's kind of not maybe the sort of poem you would enjoy very much, but it's something we have to think about. Okay, so now I'm going to, I think I've got some pockets in here. Yeah. Okay, so now I'm going to read you a little, well, pretty much all of chapter 2 of The Invisible Dance. So taking up where we left off last time. Bye smiled. I take it you're feeling a bit better? Better enough to feel at a disadvantage lying almost naked in bed. Her gaze clashed with his. But if you're going to be invisible to take me to my job at Roadplan, how will we hire a car and all that? I may not need to be invisible, in which case we can hire an air car and get there really quickly, about 3 or 4 days. He shrugged. If we're discovered by our enemies, we both have to become invisible. You might be able to do that, but I can't. You can if you're with me, he said. Don't worry, I promised I'd keep you safe, and I will. The dizziness returned momentarily. Nerine sat down. I don't understand, she said. They didn't say I was going to be in danger just getting to my new job, never mind doing it. They probably thought you wouldn't come to Akakara if they were totally honest about the political situation here, Bai said. He sat down partway up the bed, yawning. Nerine saw the shadows under his eyes. Why don't you go and lie down, she suggested, if there wasn't a problem with the car. No, it's fine. It's in the garaging below the hotel, so it's security protected. He yawned again. I think I will, if you don't mind, just for an hour or so. What about me? Can I do anything? Do you feel okay to get some shopping? Just provisions for the journey. Fruit, bread, meat, cheese, that sort of stuff. Whatever you fancy, really. There's a human-safe supermarket in the next road. You should be safe enough in the city, since it's a human settlement. We have our Père Huai to thank for that. Your what? Our ruler, our leader. He's a human. He united all the tribes. Bai smiled again. I know it sounds confusing, but I will explain. But for now, you're right. I'm sorry, I must rest. Which direction is this shop in? You'll see the lift at the end of the corridor. Go out of the hotel foyer and turn left. Cross the road at the corner, then turn so that you're walking parallel to the way you've come. The shop's halfway down the street. He went into his room, then came out again with something in his hand. Here's some money. I've got a card. He shook his head. We don't use those here. Besides, cash is untraceable. Take these notes. Get enough for about 5 or 6 days. We still might have to go on foot. He hesitated. Are you sure you're up to going out and getting supplies? I'm sure. Besides, the fresh air will do me good. All right then. Here's the key to the suite. Go out through your door. Then if anyone is watching, they'll have no reason to connect us. Noreen took the key. His hand felt warm and dry. Have a good rest, she said. She tucked the notes into the change pocket of her jeans, slipped her feet into sandals, then opened the door and went out. The corridor was cool after the sunlit room. It was dim too, but after a moment her eyes became accustomed to the lower light levels, and she saw the rectangular metal door at the end of the corridor. In the foyer, a slightly chubby man with a moustache and a faint accent asked her if she was feeling better. I'm Sergei, he explained, the manager. You were unconscious when Bai brought you in the other night. We had to carry you between us. Noreen felt her skin grow hot. I'm fine now, she said quickly. I'm just going to get some shopping. Oh, yes, the supermarket's in the next road. He waved a hand in a vague direction. If you need anything, just ask my wife or me. We'll be very happy to help you. Bai is a good friend of ours. Thank you. Noreen felt somewhat overwhelmed and was glad to make her escape. It wasn't until she got outside that it occurred to her that Sergei might think there was something between her and Bai, and her cheeks felt like searing meat. She began to walk left along the road as Bai had directed her. At the corner there was a cafe where people sat drinking. They looked human, but then so had Bai until she'd noticed his eyes. She began to wonder about the other tribes. At least, Bai had implied that there were more than just the one. She stood at the curb watching a car approach. There didn't seem to be a system of driving on either the right or the left here. Cars just drove up the middle of the road and somehow avoided each other. Perhaps it was built into their programming. She was very conscious of the alienness of the city. Even though it was supposed to be a human settlement, something about it felt peculiar. The cars were so quiet that she could hear the slap-slap of people's feet on the pavements, and although the cafe customers had been talking, she hadn't heard individual words, just a quiet murmur. How weird. A car whispered past as she stepped off the curb and on the crossing. Then she noticed an old man watching her speculatively. He didn't look like Bai, but he didn't look human either. She wondered if he'd instinctively identified her as an off-worlder as well. Evidently, he had. He walked purposefully towards her, and as he approached, she saw that there wasn't a hair on his head or face, not even eyebrows. His skin was puckered with tiny indentations, giving him a curiously undefined appearance. He didn't speak, which was just as well, since Noreen probably wouldn't have understood him. There was something repellent about him. Noreen might have smiled and nodded had she been at home in New York, but here in this city on an alien world, she suddenly felt somewhat afraid. There was something dripping from his shopping bag. Blood. As he got closer, Noreen's natural helpfulness reasserted itself, and she pointed to it. They haven't wrapped your meat very well, she said. The old man leered at her and opened the shopping bag, pointing inside it at the same time, and pushed it towards her repeatedly. She couldn't help herself. This man was a stranger and could be dangerous, but she had to know if he was any threat. She peered into the open bag. Inside the bag lay a hand, obviously newly cut off from the pool. From the pool of blood surrounding it. A hand whose skin was as dark a red as the blood it was smeared with. She stepped back a pace, stunned. Noreen thought of Bai, resting for the first time in days back at the hotel. Surely the old man hadn't come from there. And if he hadn't, and she abandoned her shopping trip and returned there immediately, wouldn't the old man know exactly where to find them, both? Apart from which, they would have no provisions to take with them. Noreen's decision was made. She averted her face and crossed the rest of the road at a brisk walk, expecting a chill touch on her back at any moment. On the far pavement she began to jog, though her legs signalled their resistance to this treatment so soon after her illness by sending cramps shooting through her calves. Yet she dared not stop, afraid that the man had been lying in wait for her and was going to follow her into the supermarket. She couldn't miss it. There were crates of fruit displayed on the pavements outside the dim interior. A green and white curtain of plastic strips kept insects out along with prying eyes. She hesitated and looked back up the street. There was no sign of the old man. But is it safe to go into the shop? I'm just going to stop there because I've received a message. Okay, I don't know what. Press the wrong one. Let me just. Okay. Just send this quick message and we'll get back onto the next. Right, so now I'm going to continue. Right. Okay. Wow. Brilliant. Oh. Okay. Right. Okay, so I'll continue now. Thank you guys for coming along. Hello, can we help you? Noreen started at the cheerful voice. A plump woman in her early 30s smiled at her from the cash desk. You're the supermarket? Yes, I take it you're looking for us. Noreen let out a sigh of utter relief. I am. This way. The woman looked and sounded entirely human. She held back the fly curtain and Noreen ducked inside. Are you okay? You look terrified. Noreen sighed. I've been rather ill since arriving here. I'm okay now, though, and I need to get some food. The woman handed her a basket. We sell imported human foods and native produce that humans can eat, so anything in here will be safe for you, but anything you need to know, just ask. Noreen couldn't erase that image of the hand pouring blood into the shopping bag from her mind, but she needed to wind down and think what her next move should be, beside the threat to Bai as well as herself. She forced herself to concentrate on the task in hand, hoping desperately that the old tribesman wouldn't know which hotel Bai used. Almost half an hour later, she accepted the change from the woman and cautiously stepped outside into the sunlight. A glance up and down the street reassured her that no strange tribesman lay in wait for her. Curiously, there was no sign of the blood trail she expected to see along the road behind her. What's that around the corner there? She asked, pointing in the opposite direction from the one she'd come in. Postal services within the city, the supermarket proprietress told her with a shrug. A few shops, nothing upmarket. Thanks, Noreen said, and decided to return to the hotel by that other route. Everything seemed perfectly normal as she rounded the corner of the street. She passed the postal services premises and kept walking. There was no sign of the old tribesman or anyone remotely resembling him. There was hardly anyone about. At the foyer of the hotel, she was relieved to see that Sergei looked just as he had when she'd left him. We haven't had any visitors, have we? No visitors, ma'am. Sergei smiled and winked at her. She headed for the lift. The shopping was heavy. At the door to the room, she paused. There was no sound from within, but then, if anyone had got in, they'd be quiet, wouldn't they? She drew a deep breath, prepared to have to run for it, and pressed the key. It bleeped and the door swung open. The first thing she had to do was check on Bai. She tiptoed fearfully into his room. He was still asleep on his bed and thankfully had the right number of hands. Noreen wondered whether or not she should put the food away, since they might have to leave in a hurry. She decided that until she'd told Bai about the old tribesman, she wouldn't do anything other than make him a coffee to wake up to. She almost gagged on the aroma, but managed to carry the mug into his room and perch it on the bedside table. "Bai," she said. He didn't move even an eyelid. She repeated his name a little more loudly. Still he didn't move. He must be exhausted, she thought, shaking him gently. He roused at last, muttering something in his own language. Then his eyes opened and he said, "Oh, it's you. Is something wrong?" "Could be," she admitted, and told him about her strange experience. His fatigue fell away from him like a cloak. "They're on to us then. I'd better check the car again and warn Sergei to be on his guard." "I thought you might say that, so I brought you some coffee to help you wake up." "Ah, thanks." He said it as if he was surprised that she'd done that for him. "What can I do?" "We might need to leave here in a hurry. Can you pack whatever you need in terms of changes of clothing and personal things? Sergei will store whatever we can't take with us. I brought a rucksack with me in case you needed it." He pointed. On the top of her bright red case, a rucksack, the same colour as his skin and clothing, lay, clashing horribly. "Is it usually necessary?" "Not up till now, but perhaps the Gerim Ha are stepping up their campaign." "Who are they?" "The enemy, at least one of them. That old man you saw was their Duran, their medicine man." "You recognised him from my description?" "Of course. He's one of the most dangerous men on the planet. If he dares show his face here, there's big trouble afoot for us." He swung his feet off the bed and jackknifed into a standing position, bent down to pick up the coffee mug and drain it all in one fluid movement. "Duran Kali is probably the best illusionist in the whole tribe." "You mean what I saw wasn't real?" "Unlikely. I'm about the only Chiorm who comes here, and I still have the full complement of body parts." He crossed to her case, bent down and opened it. "Find something the same colour as my clothes," he said. "I don't have anything. Red's not my colour." "It is now." He sighed. "OK, we'll just have to put the body paint everywhere, clothes and all. It's either that or borrow some of my things." "Why?" "Because we need to be the same colour for the vibrations to be at the right pitch when we do the invisible dance." "The what?" "Never mind. Just go in the bathroom, mix up what's in this jar with a little water and cover yourself in it. Face, hair, skin, clothes, everything. Shoes. I'm just going to check the car again as a precaution." At the door he paused again. "You must be ready when I get back. It takes a little while to dry and we might need to leave here in a hurry." Noreen watched him fade out of view. The door opened and closed behind him. She turned the jar over in her hands. It appeared to be full of reddish clay. There were no instructions. Even if there were, they'd be in Bai's language, she reasoned. She went into the bathroom and unscrewed the jar. The clay had no smell and was already slightly wet. She put the plug in the basin and ran a little water into it before adding the clay. "Should I keep some back? It might wear off." In the end, she decided to use half and see how much of her it covered. It felt disgusting to smear herself with the mud-like stuff, but as it dried, she realised it produced a fair imitation of Bai's own skin and hair colour. At that moment, she remembered a question the road plan interviewer had asked her. "I have to ask this," he'd said. "Do you have any unreasonable prejudices? If you do, then it's best not to even consider this job, as it's a multicultural society you'll be entering." I know why now," she thought ruefully. "I've just become an honorary Chiorm." It was cool and dim in the car park. Bai slipped quietly over to the hired vehicle, then stood surveying it. It looked exactly as it had the last time he'd checked it, yet there was an indefinable sense that something had changed about it. The human woman's tale of the old Gerim Ha Duran stayed his hand from the door. He surveyed the garage again, then every sense he possessed alert and seeking. There was definitely nobody else there. He stopped the vibrations of his body and watched his hands and feet shimmer back into view. He lay down and wriggled next to the edge of the car. It was dark under the vehicle. He felt the outline of the torch in his breast pocket, but instead he took the mirror from his pocket, fitted its telescopic handle and passed it underneath the car. He dared not touch the vehicle itself. He made a pass with the mirror slowly, just as they'd taught him to on Sal's World, checking for outlines that didn't belong. Nothing at the rear. He checked the centre of the chassis. It seemed all right. Then he turned his attention to the front portion of the vehicle. This was more difficult to check since it required knowledge of the engine design, but he'd been checking it regularly over the last few days and knew what to look for, and that doesn't look quite right. He knew then. It's what I feared. They know we're here. Now that he knew, he realised what the difference was. He could smell the explosives. He scrambled upright. The garage was still empty. There was no telling how long the device had been there. It was no illusion. He'd have to warn Sergei and the hire company. He fingered the phone in his other breast pocket, but common sense told him to avoid using it. If his tribe had them, so could others, particularly the Gerim Ha. He dismantled the mirror and stowed it away. His mind was made up. They'd go on foot. The human woman was his responsibility as far as road plans headquarters. I'll deliver her safely, like I always do, though it was probably because she was ill when she arrived that they got onto us. He started the vibrations again, felt the warmth they generated enclose him, and saw his hands fade out of sight again, then strode out of the garage, careful that nobody should see a door open and close, apparently on its own. Sergei was in the first floor foyer as usual. His wife, Urma, was pouring tea. "Would you like a cup, Bai?" she asked as he shimmered into view. "No thanks, Sergei. Can you do me yet another favour? Can you call the city police and tell them to send a plastics expert over? There's a device under the car. I'll need you to call the hire company and warn them not to send anyone to collect the car just yet, and also to store Noreen's bag." "Of course. You're going on foot?" "We haven't any choice. It shouldn't take too long. I'll come up and get the bag." Noreen was red to her waist when Bai and Sergei entered the room. "Just as well I told you to get that body paint on," Bai said. "I found a device under the car." "Device? You mean a bomb?" "Yeah, the car's almost certainly booby-trapped, so that when we get in and try to drive off, it'll blow." Bai gave that odd one-shouldered shrug again. "The Gerim Ha would love me to be out of the way. I'm too much of a thorn in their side." He squinted at Noreen. "You make a great Chi-Orm. They might think I've taken a wife at home." "Heaven forbid," Noreen muttered. "Do you want me to use all this stuff? And what about my shoes? The leather'll be ruined if I colour them too." Bai glanced at her shoes. "Only the colour, but I've a feeling you'll be needing a pair of red shoes for quite some time to come. At least they're a sensible height for walking, and terrestrial leather accepts the colour well. I've got proper walking boots." "Oh, use them instead then. They'll be useful in the mountains." Noreen obeyed, packing the navy sandals in the rucksack in place of the walking boots. She pulled them on, tied them up, and doused them and her jeans with the red dye. "Have you got everything you need?" Sergei asked, reaching for the bag. "I think so. Good luck. Don't worry about this. It'll be safe." He picked up the bag and left the room, closing the door behind him. "Yuck, this stuff's sticky. How long will it take to dry?" she asked. "Only a few more minutes. Then we can leave. Do you want a drink and some food before we go?" Noreen had been so intent. On their preparations, she'd forgotten that she'd hardly eaten over the past few days. Her thirst suddenly reasserted itself. "Fruit juice and another slice of toast," she murmured. "Good," Vi pronounced, and set about getting them ready. "I think you must be fit enough for us to leave." He poured some juice into a glass for himself as well, split the rest of the food between our two rucksacks. Nerine did. Then she took the glass and drained it. What juice is that?" "Kerhal fruit, from the lowland territories, a bit similar to strawberries. Did you get any water?" "I did. It's in the fridge, cooling." "Good girl." "Well, I am a geologist," she said. "I'm used to taking water on field trips." "Excellent. At least you're not the usual city dweller, constantly washing your hair and painting your toenails. I get the impression you're more robust than that. Here." He touched her forehead lightly, then her hand. "You're dry. We can start. Put on your rucksack." For the third time, Nerine obeyed. She was beginning to resent his assumption that he'd be giving the orders, but she had to depend on him for her safety. "Now hold my hand and don't let go, whatever you do." Nerine caught his outstretched hand, wondering what would come next. Vi was trembling all over. She felt the heat coming from his body. The trembles became shakes and travelled down his arm and into her. She wanted to let go, but his fingers were gripping hers as if they were glued together. Within seconds, she too was trembling, then shaking. She began to feel dizzy and realised why Bai had said she must be fit to travel. The shaking became more and more violent, then suddenly calmed. At the same moment that Bai disappeared, so did her outstretched arm. Thank you very much. Okay. Well, we just have one more thing to do, and that's completing the sandwich. What do you think about the title? It struck me this morning. So I do write poetry, and occasionally I write some science fiction poetry. So this is one of those, and it's called The Frontier Planets. On 1,000,000 whirling planets, around 1,000 spinning stars, the migrants come to work and live like they used to do on Mars. An email brings you access to your documents online, coded and encrypted with a barcode that's designed to help you where you're going and show you've paid the fee. It helps you fix up lodgings and a job and your ID. But if you lose that letter, woe betide you, as they say. You'll have to come straight back to Earth and try another day. There are colonists and workers and those not sound in mind. Some just come to start anew and leave the past behind. They come to find their fortune or to escape the war. They come to bring their culture there or just to work for more. They come to give their kids a chance to go to school at last. They come to make their dreams come true because they can learn fast. It wasn't good where they came from. The future will be better. The frontier planets are the future. Now, where did I put that letter? Here we are. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed that. The next stream is in a month's time. I can't remember the exact date offhand, but I hope you've enjoyed it. And yes, great to know that there's some people watching and listening, and yeah, fantastic. So all that remains is for me to wish you a Happy New Year. Thank you so much. Bye.